ready.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is hereby called to order. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. DeWitt, could you please lead us in the pledge? Make sure this works.
I certainly will.
Thank you, sir.
Nice.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United
United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice.
justice for all.
Yeah, I know. Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the February 3rd meeting of the Board of Finance. I'm Rob Bolito. I'm pitch hitting for Tom Flint tonight, who was on a business trip in Africa, so he will not be joining us, obviously. Mr. DeWitt is on a long-term business assignment in Pennsylvania, so he is joining us via telephone conference call. Mr. Brown will be here in about a half-hour time, so we'll have pretty much a full cast of characters here. All right, let's get right into it. Item number 1 on the agenda, to approve the minutes of the regular monthly meeting held on January 3rd, 2012. Any members have any issues, concerns about the minutes? No? Yes, Mr. Kiley.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let me find the page. It has to do with item number 5, and I'm not sure if I'm not following the minutes correctly, or if possibly I'm not remembering the evening properly. That was the $225,000 to finish the Harbor Bridge
Yes.
that we ultimately postponed to a date certain, as I recall. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my recollection as well.
Right? When you get to the vote on that, it says the motion was approved 6-3, with the nays being Flynn, Bolito, and DeWitt. I know I voted against it, and I'm not sure. I definitely voted against that.
All right, so
The motion to postpone.
I too was a little confused about it.
So I'm not sure if this paragraph clearly
Right.
reflects what happened.
okay, so it should have been 5 yeas, 4 nays, with Flynn, Bolito, DeWitt, and Kiley voting against.
I don't know. I thought it was 6-2. Did we have 9 people that night even?
We had a full house that
Did we have,
night.
okay, so
Yeah.
that's good.
So it would have been 5-4, because this is showing 6-3.
Flynn might be wrong. Flynn might have voted for it.
Might have been Kiley instead of,
I know I voted against it, but I don't know what Flynn did. So,
all right, so,
hold it over?
all right, Mr. Hiller, can we hold over
Definitely
voting
wrong.
on
And
the minutes?
I think we can do with, check with Mr. Spino, or maybe we can even check the video.
All right, go to the
Yeah.
videotape.
Videotape.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
It's definitely wrong, because we had quite a spirited conversation about
Yeah,
that.
I remember
And I
that.
know that the two of us voted against it.
Yeah.
I thought it was just us two.
We'll have to double check on that.
Anyway,
Mr. Hiller, do we need to vote to postpone a vote on that, or just do it administratively?
Well, I think what you could do is table the minutes until we verify.
Okay. That's what we'll do then. We'll table the minutes until we verify the vote on item number 5, okay? All right.
thank you.
No problem, thank you. All right, item number 2, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution to accept a Connecticut STEEP grant 2012 in the amount of $400,000, and to authorize the first selectman to execute such grant agreement with the state to reconstruct the Penfield Pavilion parking lot. Who's going to be speaking on this tonight? I'm assuming the first selectman. Mr. White, thank you. Good evening, Mr. White, how are you?
Good evening. We received a notice from the state that our application for a $400,000 STEEP grant was approved, and the STEEP stands for Small Town Economic Assistance Program. And it was approved to reconstruct the Penfield parking lot and construct additional sidewalks leading to the pavilion. Just for brief background information, in 2008, we received a $400,000 STEEP grant to help offset the cost of replacing the east wing of the pavilion. The west wing was completed this summer, and in order to keep the project costs down, we decided to use DPW crews to A, demolish and dispose of the old building, B, construct the entire foundation and any site work, and finally to reconstruct the parking lot. Included I included $182,000 in the Penfield project budget to construct the parking lot, and that was for materials and paving, with the assumption that the DPW labor would be used to install the pavers. When the opportunity came up to apply for a steep grant, we decided to include the parking lot because of the following benefits. First, it frees up the DPW labor to use in the spring to catch up on projects. B, it frees up $182,000 that we had budgeted for the lot in the Penfield project budget to be used to construct a bulkhead around the perimeter of the pavilion to better protect the building and the adjacent neighborhood from flooding due to tidal surges. And finally, it allows us to construct the additional sidewalks that I mentioned for pedestrians from the immediate neighborhoods to safely access the facility. With respect to the parking lot, to be more aesthetically pleasing and environmentally sensitive, only the aisles of the lot where the cars actually travel will be done with traditional paving. The spaces where the cars actually park will consist of concrete pavers with open spaces that allows the stormwater to drain directly back into the ground. The use of concrete pavers has significant benefits. It helps to break up the look of the parking lot versus a traditional black paving. Secondly, a majority of the stormwater in the lot will infiltrate through the pavers into the gravel base below, reducing the runoff from the lot and decreasing the pollutants that would normally enter the sound via the catch basins and the stormwater pipes. When the stormwater enters the gravel base beneath the pavers, the pollutants are broken down by microbial action, very similar to what happens in a leaching field of a septic system. This is what the pavers look like, and this is just one type of many that we might use. This is a concrete paver, and it's approximately 25 inches this way by 15 inches the other way, and about 3¼ inches thick. So it's put down in a base of gravel and sand, and at a level, all level, like the pavement is. And then the sand is also put into the spaces in between. That's what allows the water to infiltrate back into the ground. This is an example of it in a parking lot. Here it's a little more formal. They actually planted grass in between the spaces, but what would grow at the pavilion would be whatever weeds decide to pop out. We did a mock-up of the lot. Again, this is the old pavilion, but it's the latest aerial we had. And this is the parking lot, and what's shown in brown would be where the pavers are installed, and they represent where the cars would park. And all the traditional routing for the cars in and out and finding a space will be done with traditional paving. So if you can imagine, if we, well, we will grade this appropriately so that excuse me, the rainwater that falls on the lot will wash across the lot like in a sheet flow action, and most of it will be absorbed into the pavers and get back into the ground. Again, it cuts down on the runoff that enters the street, which infinitesimally reduces flooding. That isn't very significant, but it does allow the water to get back into the ground, and that's better for the environment because otherwise it would just simply flow into the catch basins and shoot right out to Long Island Sound. I wanted to just show you a note one. This is the, again, the Penfield Pavilion down here, and this is the sidewalk that we intended to put in from an existing sidewalk up here along the south side past the tennis club and down to Beach Road. And there are crosswalks here so people can get safely across to the other side. The reason we chose this side is it's a lot more constructible on this side of the road. There's a lot more homes, driveways, trees, etc. on this side here. And then, once the people are across the street, obviously, that's where the pavilion is, so it makes sense. And we feel that's very, very beneficial, because people do, this is a very young neighborhood, they do walk down here, and that's the way they get to the pavilion. I just wanted to point out the related project to this, which is the bulkhead. Remembering that the steep grant allowed us to free up the money that we initially intended to use in the budget for the parking lot, and with the permission of the building committee, use it for a bulkhead to protect the building. And this, I'm trying to want to explain what goes on here. Long Island Sound, obviously. The old pavilion sat here like a dam, really. It sat lower in the sand, and this yellow line indicates high ground. This is actually a man-constructed berm that we put in quite a few years ago in the 60s. This is that wall that you see along the parking lot. But it's at elevation approximately 12. The same thing over here. There's a constructed wall. You won't first notice it, but it's large stones underneath the ground with sand over the top, so it kind of looks like a natural berm, but it really is a constructed dike, so to speak. Then it ties in here to high ground also. So obviously, when a tidal surge occurred, the old building, even though it was off the ground a little bit, it did serve as a dam to plug this hole. When the new building was built, it needed to be constructed to FEMA regulations, requiring the first floor elevation to be at 12, and that pushed it up over the ground a couple of feet. And that obviously was a pathway for the water, if there was a tidal surge, to come underneath the building and do a couple of things. The first obvious thing is, once it goes underneath the building, it gets into this neighborhood here, all the way up to Edward Street and down to Reef Road and to Beach Road. This neighborhood is extremely flat, and so it's susceptible to flooding, especially because it is so flat, and the storm drains are below high tide. If the tide is up and it's raining hard, the check valves on the stormwater system stay closed, and the water really can't get out of this area. So if you have that condition plus Long Island Sound by a tidal surge getting into this neighborhood, then you have a double whammy for the flooding of the neighborhood. This shows you what happened during Storm Irene. We had still water elevation of about 9.5 feet, which means that, remember, the deck is around 12 feet. The sand out there is around 8 feet. Still water means that the elevation of the water, due to the storm conditions, without the waves, still water, in other words, if you were to measure it without the waves, or like in South Benton Marina, it was 9.5 feet. You add a couple extra feet for the waves, and now you're on the deck, which is at 12 feet. Then, using your imagination, this is the side of the pavilion facing the water. So you've got the waves and the water action coming through. It's going out underneath the building and shooting out the front of the building, through the parking lot and down Penfield Road into the neighborhood. You can see this flooding in Penfield area, Penfield Road, and then you can see as high up as Edward Street, 1 or 2 feet of water in the road. I want to make it clear, though, this isn't the only source of water that floods the neighborhood, and this is to back up a little bit why we were a little bit fooled or didn't anticipate the seriousness of this contributing to flooding. In the last storm that we had really good experience of was the winter storm in 1992, and we had still water elevation of 9.6 or so, but we did have higher waves then. That neighborhood did flood. It did get flooded from some action from Penfield, but there are many other sources that can contribute that to that neighborhood when you've got a storm that significant. It can literally go over Fairfield Beach Road on the south side, start pouring down Fairfield Beach Road, it'll come over the tennis club property, et cetera. So there is this window of vulnerability that unfortunately we became acutely aware of in the March storm, which is a no-name storm, just before, and then Hurricane Irene. Those two storms where we were at elevation 9.5 or below, this was a significant contributor of water to get into that neighborhood and did cause damage to several of the homes. Again, the purpose of the bulkhead is two purposes. One is to prevent that tidal surge from going up, from going underneath the building and getting into the neighborhood. And it's also to protect the building itself. After the March storm, we installed a skirt around the whole building to simulate what was there before, the old building sitting in the sand with a skirt on it. And we thought that even though we engineered this skirt pretty well with a lot of bracing in it, et cetera, it didn't work. A couple of things, well, several things actually battered into it. Two of the lifeguard chairs we wish we had removed. But even if they hadn't gone through it, there were two trees that came across, not trees, but good-sized logs that came across Long Island Sound. Underneath the building, there was a great big piece of a piling that was there. So even under the best conditions, you could never be sure that something isn't going to come flying across the sound during a storm and batter this thing and break it. So you can't depend on it. This shows you also that having the water go underneath the building isn't a great idea because it can channel in certain places and scour out areas which can undermine the piers and the foundation. It only happened in the storm on 2, which we were able to creatively rebuild. The other thing that makes the building vulnerable is in the front of the building, there are several access ways, obviously, for the people to get to the beach, including these long handicap ramps. And they are real vulnerable because they're out there, further out in the sand. The bulkhead, the purpose of the bulkhead or the design of the bulkhead will be where possible to go around these and to protect those also. But it's a trade-off. We can't protect them all. Some will have to go behind it. Some we will go in front of, and they will require to maintain the openings, weir boards that would have to be put in before a storm. But that's the type of trade-off that we think is reasonable. The bulkhead itself would be a traditional wooden bulkhead. It has 10-inch wooden pilings that are literally driven into the ground. They're 20 feet long. They're driven to the ground 16 feet with 4 feet exposure. And then these planks here, or sheathing, which are tongue and groove, are also driven into the ground. And then there's large 6x6 cross boards down here and there that connect it together. It's a very sturdy system. The whole idea is that it's independent of the building. It doesn't put any pressure on the building. And the goal will be to get it as close as we can to the building so that we can push sand up against it to minimize even the looks of it. We might even get the sand almost up to the top. And then creatively tie it into the building where it's necessary so it'll still be aesthetically pleasing. It won't look like a big dam around the Penfield structure. This is not the appropriate application, but again, you could see what you would be looking at from the beach if the building was back here. But then again, imagine this is 4 feet, and like we have it down there now, we can push the sand up high onto it so that we can hide, most of it. So that's the project and the plan. I'll answer your question.
Thank you, Mr. White. Before I go to the board, did Mr. Tetra or Mr. Hiller have anything to add on this, or we good? Not at this time. Thank you. All right, then I will throw it open to the board for questions. Mr. Stone.
Hi, Mr. White. On the pavers, are there any maintenance that'll have to be done? In other words, winter, pushes them up, or are they going to be pretty, I'm thinking of people walking on them and not being even.
Right. No, they're in a pretty significant base, at least a foot of gravel and sand material, so it drains properly, and they're set in and they interlock well. The ones we've seen, they basically are just end up very flat like a parking lot, and they can be plowed, et cetera. So,
Question.
right, they're very popular now for very large parking lots at universities, shopping malls, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay. Any other board members have questions? Mr. Brockfeld?
Thanks. Simple one for you, Rich. If you go back, you don't have to, if you went back to close to the beginning of your presentation, you talked about, you showed one where they put grass in the pavers to make
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
And then you made a comment, well, that wouldn't work down there because the weeds would be the plant of choice.
Right.
So what's going to prevent it to be a weed-strewn paver situation?
You mean weeds getting out of hand?
Yeah.
We could, we'll have to see how much it's going to grow down there, but they're mostly going to be in the shade of the cars, et cetera, but we would weed whack it with the summer help if it became ugly looking. What you saw in that picture there, they were deliberately
No, I understand.
putting
I guess
soil
what actually was coming in my mind was, obviously you could weed whack it, but was that we're trying to do something environmental, and then I thought, okay, so the solution would be to spray horrible chemicals to
I know.
prevent the weeds. That wouldn't exactly be very,
that wouldn't be a good one. No.
environmental, so.
Right.
Okay, so the answer is it would just be tended to.
Right. I've seen them in parking lots. Sherwood Island had some. I didn't look at that one, but other ones that I've seen pictures of, it didn't become a problem.
Okay,
The weeds were very sporadic. It just.
okay. I'll leave that to your expertise. I just don't want
Yeah,
to
well-
have a situation where we're approving something that sounds like a good idea. It's a new idea, and then there's
Right.
a lot of expense hypothetically in maintaining them in the ways that weren't anticipated, and that would be one
I
example.
hear what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that because of the extensive commercial use that these are been installed in lately.
Okay, well, like I said, I really genuinely trust your judgment. I just wanted to raise it.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Brockfeld. Anyone else? Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Bolito. Rich, could you flip back to the slide that showed the new sidewalks, if I heard you correctly? And if I heard you correctly, those are going to be new sidewalks on the beach side of the road for quite a ways, right? Okay, so my questions are the complete expense for all of those sidewalks already included in your project?
Yes.
And do you anticipate any other ancillary expenses, like additional road work expense or even legal expense? Do you have any right-of-way issues? Are there any stumbling blocks to just getting those sidewalks in, or any additional expenses that might come along with them that you might not know about or have planned for today?
Nothing significant. I mean, we've literally walked the whole area. It's a much better choice than this side because you have a lot of driveways and that type of situation.
I would agree with that, right?
You have,
Yeah.
you do have some people over here,
Right,
like they have over here, put their plantings in the right of way.
right.
We have to deal with that, but that's really not, we've put in sidewalks down the end of Fairfield Beach Road recently in front of some houses that had the same issues. Plantings, they thought the right-of-way was their front yard and put plantings in there.
Right.
We work with the neighbors to move the stuff back.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you don't anticipate any big issues or big additional expenses?
No.
Okay.
There's only just a couple of trees. It's really one of the easier ones.
Good.
We've done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Any other board members? Mrs. Leclerc.
Just a quick one, and maybe you've already done it. When we toured the property, when you were doing the actual building, you talked about lighting for the parking lot. Have you done that, or do you still intend to?
No, the parking lot's installed. The lighting's installed in the parking
Okay.
lot, and it has it's very effective, and it has shields in the back that protects it extraneous light from getting into the neighbors and stuff like that. I haven't had one complaint about it.
Great.
But if you go by at night, you'll see that it's very adequately lit.
Okay. Thank you.
Al Kelly designed that.
And we know where he lives. Anyone else? Mrs. Gaffney.
Just one quick question, and I apologize if it's in the information and I didn't see it. When is the sidewalk work going to start, and how long do you anticipate it taking?
We'll start in the spring, and it should just take a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeWitt, did you have any questions for Mr. White?
I don't believe so. Just one quick comment. I'm hearing everyone pretty well except for the right-hand side, Mr. Stone, Mr. Brockfield, Mr. Kiley.
Okay, so you're not hearing anyone else.
Phones, then it's
All right, we'll work on it.
okay. No, everyone else, I'm fine. No questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I just had a couple. With respect to the interlocking pavers, now, there is still going to be a gap between each paver. They're not meant to be, like, butted right up against each other, correct?
They're very close as you can get. It's almost like tiling on a floor.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're going to use some sort of sand to fill in the gaps between?
Yes.
Okay.
More like stone dust, which locks it in.
Right, just like you would on a residential, like a patio type of thing. Okay. Any concern, given the fact that we're going to be using Penfield for events, anticipating dances, weddings, things like that, girls in high heels, any worry about people navigating those for those type of events and liability issues?
Again, it's used extensively in parking lots for purposes from shopping malls, based on what I've seen on the internet, and references from the suppliers of these to universities, where you always end up with that situation
Right.
where someone's got to get out of the car and go into, get onto the paved way. Some of these lots, those other lots, are done completely with pavers. In this case here, the people get out of the car and then walk a few feet to get onto the asphalt pavement.
Right.
But they, again, should be very level and kept that way, and it should be a good walking surface.
Okay. Certainly, go right ahead.
I hesitate even to bring, because it really isn't our place to be, necessarily doing engineering questions. But I must say that to me is a really serious question, and I think there is financial liability. I'm closing my eyes and I'm seeing a young woman or a student or anybody who's going to a party, and we do have parties down there that some people dress up for, I assume,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And if they're wearing, I've seen some of the heels that I've seen my teenager and her friends wear, quite seriously. Some of them are like ridiculous, right? I mean, I'm talking.
I'm familiar with them, yes.
And,
I have a 22-year-old.
If I'm envisioning these things as I saw your picture,
Yeah.
if you got out of the car and didn't know, or even if you did know, and that heel went into one of those holes, you could easily twist or break your ankle. I mean,
Yeah, this is, the holes,
it just strikes me as potentially a problem. Yeah, I mean, that picture, looks to me like those, I'm just guessing those holes are a couple inches in diameter, right?
The dark,
say it here, it's an inch and a half by an inch and a half or so, but you've got a pretty, you got a pretty compact substance in there. You got a mixture of sand and gravel.
So you're saying it's not really, so you're saying the hole is not hollow? Is not empty?
No, it's filled in with sand and
Oh,
gravel.
okay, I didn't understand that, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Right.
so, yeah,
Oh, okay.
thanks for the
That's why-
clarification.
yeah,
I
no,
wasn't sure about that either.
Yeah, I
Right.
didn't explain it well, but then,
Yeah,
no.
okay, I thought it was hollow.
There, and then sand and gravel was swept into all this and then evened off, so you end up with
That answers the question.
okay.
And that's compacted down to the point where it's pretty solid. I mean, it's not like the heel's going to sink into the sand or anything. Okay, that's fine. Now, going to the bulkhead question, any chance for federal help on that, given the fact that you're talking about a neighborhood that's in a FEMA flood zone that gets flooded, and the irony that FEMA made us jack the building up, and that's causing more flooding in the area? Any possibility for federal help with that, as well as what we're getting from the state?
We're simultaneously trying for a grant, but in our last correspondence with the state official that's setting up the priorities, there were so many that it didn't seem like it was going to be successful.
Okay,
So
but we are looking into it.
We did reach out for a FEMA flood mitigation grant.
Okay. One last question with respect to the sidewalk that's going down the road there. Who exactly are you taking the land from? Is that town-owned land? Is it part of the current road down there right now?
Exactly.
What is that going to do in terms of traffic, given the fact that if you're taking some of that space for the sidewalk, obviously the road's going to be narrower, I would assume?
No, we have the, if you walk this here, you'll see the road and a grass area that's our right-of-way,
Okay.
at least 5 feet plus all the way down. So it's there, and it's ours, and we can use it.
Okay, so it's not technically part of the road. It's kind of that little side
Exactly.
brush area.
And-
Okay,
and that
I
was
got
one
it.
of the concerns, because there are some future thoughts to create a bikeway along here.
Right.
And this here will not in any way preclude taking away from the width to allow that bikeway to occur
Okay.
in the future, so,
So the sidewalk's not going to impact the width, the current width of the road right now?
correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. At this point, I will turn it to the public. Does any member of the public have any questions, comments, actually comments and concerns about this proposal? Mr. Gallagher, please step up. And I would ask anyone making public comment tonight if you could just use the mic so we can get you for posterity on Fair TV, and also if you could just identify yourselves for the record, name and address. Thank you.
I'm Jim Gallagher, Congress Street in Fairfield. I'm also the chairman of the building committee for Penfield. On behalf of the building committee, we want to thank this board for your continued support. We're pretty pleased with the pavilion and the way that it turned out. I think it's a pretty good asset for the town. The parking lot that Rich is talking about with the pavers and everything, I think it's important for this board to understand. This is not a new concept. The building committee had adopted this more than a year ago. This has been in our plans for more than a year. The steep grant that was granted by the state is a tremendous bonus. We would have been able to finish the project. We're on budget. We have money in the budget to finish the parking lot as Richie has described. This is just a new allocation of funds, which is going to allow us to do a lot more things with the bulkhead and the sidewalk than we had originally planned. And I think it's going to make it that much more of an asset. But the building committee is 100% behind these plans. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other member of the public like to come up and speak on this particular topic? Seeing none, back to the board for any final comments or thoughts. Anyone? I did have one quick question for Mr. Tetro. With respect to the steep grant end of it, they don't always give you the amount you requested, correct? So what would happen in the event that for some reason we got less than the $400,000 requested? Where would that money come from? Or do they always give you the amount that's requested? I guess that's the question.
In this case, we applied for, I believe, close to $500,000.
Okay, that's the max that they're allowed.
What we're talking about is the state has come back to us with a letter or an award for the grant,
Okay.
and it's specified that we will get the $400,000.
All right, so there's a commitment on the part of the state to fund
Correct.
$400,000. Great, that's all I needed to know. Thank you. All right, any last comments? No? Oh, Mr. Kiley, yes, please.
Mr. Bolito, I move item 2.
All right, item is moved. Second, Mr. Brockfeld. All those in favor? And Mr. DeWitt, you can just say yes, because we obviously can't see you raise your hand, or no.
Aye.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are unanimous on that one in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many people? 1, 2, 7. Thank you. Count much. All right. That passes 7-0-0. All right, on to the next item. Thank you very much, Mr. White and Mr. Gallagher. Appreciate it. Item number 3, to hear or consider and act upon a request from the Town Facilities Commission for a special bond appropriation in the amount of $11 million for the replacement of the Fairfield Ward High School roof. Such special bond appropriation to be funded by 20-year general obligation bonds pursuant to the notice and bonding resolution. Who's going to be presenting this one? Mr. Kelly?
We're on TV, right?
Yes, you are.
Oh, yeah, just wanted to point out, did you check Mr. White's accent? It sounded like he was from Chelsea, Massachusetts. It's up there in the north.
That would be
I'm wearing my
Patriots
big blue
territory, wouldn't
t-shirt,
it?
My
Yeah.
big blue shirt today with a collar. Just throw that out there. Just go Giants, go Giants. Al Kelly, Town Facilities Commission
Good
Chairman.
evening, Mr. Kelly.
Just to lighten it up a little, right? We're asking you for $11 million tonight for the Ward Roof project. We spent about 7 months? 7 months in design and development of the project. Before you is the packet we handed to the Board of Selectmen. Within the packet is a considerable amount of information. I'm sure you're going to have questions. I brought with me the expert in roofs. I am not an expert in roofs. I know that they are black, and I know that they're single ply and double ply and all sorts of great things. And Aaron is going to fill in on that part of it. The $11 million is going to cover a phased renovation or removal of the roof, and Aaron is going to take it from here.
Okay.
And I will.
Thank you. If you could just give your full name and occupation and company for the record, thanks.
Sure. My name is Erin Eichler, and I'm a project manager for Hoffman Architects.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. We were hired back in 2011, in spring 2011, to help the Town Facilities Commission and the town plan a roof replacement project for Ward High School. Essentially, we were tasked to develop a phasing plan and a recommended roof system for replacing the existing roof there. If you look at, excuse me, you should have a copy of the phasing plan. Actually, he's going to hand that out.
Was that in the emailed packet, Paul, or is this it?
No, it was not.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to pass this around now.
Color.
Take one down, pass it around. You can't have one, Mr. DeWitt, sorry.
So, as Al mentioned, the plan is to phase the project over 4 years. Based on what we were able to observe on the surface of the roof and based on the number of leaks and the location of leaks within the building, we developed this plan. The first phase, or the first year, would be the items colored in the red color, and this would include the library, administration, auditorium, and cafeteria wings. And the second phase is the yellow color, and that's the gymnasium and locker rooms. The third phase is the blue color, and that's the industrial arts wing and the Pequot House classrooms. And the fourth phase is the green phase, which is the Townsend and Fitz House classroom wings. Essentially, the roof system that we were recommending is a two-ply modified bitumen roof system. What's on the existing roof right now is a single-ply PVC roof. Based on our experience with single-ply roofs, essentially you have one layer of material that's protecting your roof. When seams open, when there's a tear in the roof, you essentially will have a leak. One of the benefits of a two-ply system is that you have a double layer of material that is fused together, as opposed to having one layer of material that's loosely sat on the substrate. Modified bitumen roofs are more durable. They're easier to maintain, whereas the existing PVC roof can have a lifespan of 10 to 15 years. Modified bitumen roofs can have a lifespan of 30 to 40 years. The system that we're proposing would come with a 20-year warranty. Let's see. Essentially, we are recommending removing the existing PVC roofing and the rigid insulation down to the existing coal tar roofing, which was the original roofing that was on the school when it was built. There's a series of roof decks on the school. There's poured concrete roof decks, there's metal deck, There's poured gypsum decks, and there's some, on one of the gymnasiums, there's a tectum deck, which essentially is like a fiber panel. We started to pursue the option of, I guess I can talk about the state reimbursement for the replacement of the roof. In order to qualify for state reimbursement, you have to remove all of the existing roofing down to the bare deck, which would involve removing the coal tar roofing, which is adhered to the deck right now. And it's our opinion that the removal of this roofing on this deck would cause significant damage to the decking, especially at the gypsum deck where it would require full replacement of the gypsum decking. And also part of the requirements for state reimbursement is to use a half-inch per foot slope for the insulation unless you're able to qualify for a pitch waiver, which we also pursued. And essentially to qualify for the pitch waiver, you have to meet 4 requirements. You have to essentially prove that using the 1/4-inch pitch as opposed to half-inch pitch would not impede drainage on the roof. Since we are adding roof drains, overflow drains, and some overflow scuppers at the edge of the roof, we felt that, using the 1/4-inch pitch would not impede drainage in any way. In fact, because the pitch on the roof right now is so minimal, the 1/4-inch pitch would actually improve drainage on the roof. The second requirement would be to show that using the half-inch pitch and the work required to accommodate the half-inch pitch would significantly add to the duration of the project. The third requirement would be that the cost required to accommodate the half-inch pitch per foot would also be a significant hardship. And the fourth requirement was to show that the existing structure of the building itself would not be able to support the extra weight of the half-inch per foot slope and any associated snow loads. Based on the letter that we submitted to the state, they came back with comments that said, basically because the project was going to be phased over 4 years, they felt that using the half-inch pitch would not represent a significant increase in the duration of the project. And also, we were not tasked to provide a full structural analysis of the roof, and short of doing such a task, we were not able to prove that the existing roof cannot handle, the existing roof structure cannot handle the half-inch per foot slope. In speaking with the state, you have to meet all 4 of those requirements. It's not sufficient to just meet one. So you can do a full structural analysis of the roof and still prove that it can meet the added weight, and they will deny you the pitch waiver. So if you look at our construction cost estimate, we did actually do the exercise of doing the scope A, which is the proposed scope.
I'm sorry, I'm going to just stop you for a moment. Let's
Okay.
just get on the same page literally here. You're talking about the construction cost estimates, got the 4 phases, Scope A, Scope B, et cetera. Everybody have it? Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. Go ahead.
Scope A is the proposed scope, which is the removal of the existing roofing and the insulation down to the existing coal tar, leaving that in place, only repairing the deck as required based on what's exposed after removal. And that is the $9.1 million that was included in the project cost summary sheet. If you look at Scope B, that is actually the work required to qualify for reimbursement without receiving the pitch waiver. So one of the major costs associated with that is the removal of the existing coal tar roofing throughout the roof and the full replacement of the gypsum decking with new metal deck. And that came to about $14.1 million. Scope B, alternate 2, would be pursuing the reimbursement with the pitch waiver. So essentially the only difference between Scope B, alternate 1, and alternate 2 would be the cost associated with accommodating the half-inch per foot slope. It would still require the full removal of the coal tar roofing and the replacement of the gypsum decking. So.
Just to circle back to Al Kelly, the reimbursement part of it, we submitted the letter. Essentially, it boiled down to, after discussions with Dr. Title, the first selectman, that it was going to cost the town roughly $1 million so that we get reimbursed 26% of the overall project. So it'd be a net loss to the town. And it was just decided that, forget it. And then there's some, maybe the first selectman can add to it when asked, but they are pursuing legislatively getting reimbursement with Senator McKinney and, I'm not sure, Kim Fawcett? I'm not sure what her
State rep.
State Rep.
Yep.
Kim Fawcett, correct? Yes, okay. So when you have that question, I'm sure the First Selectman will bail me out.
Okay. All right, at this time, did the First Selectman want to chime in, or you just want to wait for questions?
Actually, can I just add one
Sure,
thing?
please do.
It might come up as far as the benefit of removing that coal tar roofing, like what it's actually gaining you. It will not affect the integrity of the actual roof system that we are proposing. It really would just be an increase in the amount of labor and the amount of the cost, obviously, of the project
Right.
and the time it would take to remove all that material within a given summer.
Okay,
So.
thanks. Mr. Tetro?
Since Mr. Kelly was nice enough to include me in the conversation, I
Dragged
will,
him in.
try and clarify there. Two things there. One, we looked at it, if you look at the alternatives, it'd basically be $5 to $6 million more in total construction cost to get almost all of that reimbursed. So it's still, the net would be $1 million increase in cost to the town to build the structure. And that assumes we got the full amount reimbursed. Now, with a roof, that's a reasonably high probability, but we know with the state, there's no guarantees, and with the, we've just gone through the Harbor Road example where we were supposed to get 100% reimbursed for a bridge, which is also a pretty straightforward project.
Yeah.
And they changed the rules mid-game, and since it stretches over 4 years, that adds the increased risk in doing that. So it seems safer to go with a lower dollar amount, build what we can. Now, as Mr. Kelly also mentioned, we are exploring options with our state delegation to see if it would be possible to get, in essence, the reimbursement done on the project we're going to do. So rather than having to meet the state requirements of removing the, I'm going to say, gypsum decking all the way through, which is one of the labor-intensive things that increases the cost, as well as adding the pitch waiver, if we can get both those reduced, potentially we can get a reimbursement on part of what we're actually doing.
Okay.
So that's why we're going ahead, the recommendation is to go ahead with the recommended option, and then look at if we can get some state delegation help to add some special legislation that will allow us to get this project to qualify for state reimbursement as is.
Okay. Now, just to clarify, the recommended option is what's known as Scope A, is that correct? Okay, so that's page 1. Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we will throw it open to board members for questions, comments. Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Bolito. This might be for Mr. Tetra before he sits down. Just a really, I think it's a really straightforward question, though. The bonding resolutions for $11 million in Project A, which appears to include construction contingency, gets us to about 9.8. Can you explain the delta between the 11 and the 9.8? I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, I believe it does, the 9.8 doesn't include all the costs. I believe there's a cost schedule that should have been included in your packet. Roof replacement
Possible.
project.
Am I
Fairfield
missing
High
that one
School.
page?
Project cost summary
Hey, I've
sheet,
got some extra copies if you need that.
and that takes you from 9.1 up to the 11 million.
I see it now, Mike. Thank you. I just didn't have this one particular page that bridged the gap for me. Thank you.
Okay, you good, Mr. Kiley?
I am.
Okay. Any other board members have questions? Mr. Brockfeld.
Thanks. I guess the one question, among many, is, thank you for coming tonight. The four phases. Why don't you walk us through briefly why you think it should be done in 4 phases?
I'll start.
And then my follow-up question, I'll give you both, is, because I can't see in here, is there built-in escalations in terms of assumptions of cost differentials, years 1, 2, 3, 4?
I'll start that. Basically, the size of the roof project, or the roof itself, is
267,000 square feet.
267,000 square feet, and it's more than they can get done in one summer. So we have to phase it over that period of time. Essentially, that's it in a nutshell.
So this is summer work?
Yes, only, we can't do this extensive roof work replacement with students in the building.
Not, okay.
And you certainly can't tear a section off and keep it empty. You know, our capacities, we're really at our full capacity.
This might sound a little foolish, but you described the option we're using as not pulling off the tar topping. So why necessarily would that mean you can't work while the buildings are occupied?
It's a law. You can't,
Oh.
you can't, not while the students are there.
Okay, fair enough. And then okay, well, that answers one question, and then the other question was a cost question in terms of the assumed escalations in the quote.
Yes, we did assume that. Actually, if you kind of look at the roof plan, you can see we divided up the overall area of the roof pretty equally over the phases. So you can kind of see the escalation if you look at the construction cost estimate over Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 and 4, that, you know, generally the areas of the roof stay the same, but the overall cost of the project does increase.
Well, let me ask you, I figured there was some answer like that. You're answering part of it, so I was wondering if Phase 1, 2, 3, 4 were relatively equal. If they are, and I'm sure they're not exactly equal, right, but they're somewhat equal, some of the increases are dramatic, right? I mean, we have an economy currently, you know, with virtually no inflation, hopefully, and I see numbers going, in one case, from 65,000 to 136,000 over 4 years, 195 to 275, 18 to 45. So these are 3- and 4-fold increases.
I mean, some of it is assumed too, based on the amount of effort that's going to be put into, once the removal of the existing roof at the first phase of the project, you'll be able to see the condition of the existing coal tar roofing, whether there's more areas that need to be repaired, cleaned up prior to the installation of the new system. I mean, right now, it's kind of hard to assume what the condition of the roofing is below based on the few small probes that we did.
So without being too untechnical, you're almost saying that the early phases are guinea pigs for the later phases?
Not guinea pigs. I mean, there's still things that you're going to discover once you remove a roof that, you know, you weren't anticipating that you're going to have to factor into the work going forward. I mean, that's just an assumption now. I mean, it might not prove to be so. Also, one of the differences, too, based on the phases, there's a difference in the number of penetrations within the roof that require, you know, more labor to flash around. I believe at one phase there's a lot of conduits that are actually on the surface of the roof that would have to be almost moved around in order to get underneath there. So there's there's a variance in the physical work that would be done in a phase, whereas the areas of the overall roof are relatively the same. So that's where the difference is.
Did she answer the question?
Yes, she certainly answered the question. Not really in a way that makes me totally comfortable. To be perfectly honest, I'm not being critical. I just don't. In other words, I'd almost be rather if you said to me, you know, just looking at install new blocking and gravel stops, right, just to pick a line, where it goes 18, 20, 42, 45. I'd almost rather you say to me, look, we underpriced Phase 1, but because we don't know what we're going to find in Phase 3 and 4. In other words, there can't be that much inflation from year to year.
Right.
To do the
But
same thing.
those are standard numbers. Those are numbers that you use to escalate out a project. There was a time we were using 8 and 9% on some of the projects. It all depends on how the economy goes and where the bids.
Yeah, but these, you know, again, I'm being pure numbers guy right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I know you are.
I'm seeing increases in some cases of 200% and 300% over a 4-year period.
Right.
And in other words, the acceptable answers would be things like, well, Phase 1 is a lot less work and Phase 4 is a lot more work, right? That would be an obvious answer. Or we're sort of underpricing the earlier phases, knowing that there might be things in the outer phases and we might not have to spend that much. And you're over budgeting to protect yourselves from looking like you need more money later. I
Well,
mean, all
that-
those are
that-
possibilities.
yes,
But there can't be 300% increases in costs over
But as we
4-year
go forward,
period.
as we go forward with the roofs, yes, that's a part of it. All that was taken into consideration. It's just, it's going to be a long-duration project. There's going to be unknowns. It's like digging in the dirt. You don't know what you're going to dig up. Even if you do call before you dig, that your gas may not turn off the gas in your house. Sorry, that's a personal problem. But serious, but that's really where it is. It's there'll be less unknowns in some instances when the roof does come off in the first phase, or it'll be eye-openers and say, we're going to have the same situation over there.
Can I just follow on this a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. On a project of this size, and I'm just trying to remember from previous ones we've talked about, so I apologize. Do we have, so we have an architect oversees the project, plans it, and then we have obviously a construction contractor that we, right. Do we have a third-party, completely independent person overseeing the cost side of this?
No, we do not. What we do have is, within this budget, is having construction administration of three site visits a week by the architect to oversee the project, take notes, make sure the project is executed according to the contract documents. As far as the budgeting part of it, our bills would be essentially maybe some change orders that may come through for unforeseen conditions. The monthly rec from the builder who's replacing the roof, and the architect's bills. And Mr. Hiller is going to help me with that.
Yeah, okay, I guess what I'm
So
getting
the
at
summary,
is-
the bottom line kind of summary. We didn't want, do you believe we need to hire someone to do the actual accounting? We didn't think there was only.
I guess what I'm getting at is that there's two ways to budget these things, right? There's many ways, but there's two ways I could think of. One way that we've had problems with the past is we've under-budgeted and we've gone over, and you have to come back and all that. Obviously, nobody wants to do that, so the natural tendency is to go the other direction and to over-budget, hypothetically, or possibly, and then to hope to come in on or under budget and everybody's happy. And what concerns me, though, and it goes back, it's tangential to what I've been concerned about in the past, where we approve bonding resolutions and then go out and ask people to bid on projects, right? Which
Right.
makes no sense to me. To this day, nobody's ever explained that to me in a way that makes any sense. So the same concern would go here to me, which is that we have very large escalations built in here.
Yes.
For a variety of reasons.
Yes.
But the one thing we do know is that somebody who bids on this project or gets this project sees this pot of money with these escalations built into it.
Yes.
And it makes it very tempting to tailor the project as it goes along to spend the dollars that have been allocated.
Okay.
So that's why I wondered if we could have a completely independent, totally.
The Town Facilities Commission is going to oversee the project. We're going to shepherd it through.
Do you guys have the kind of expertise to be up on the roof when they say we need, we've opened this thing up and we need to do?
Erin
this?
does. She'll be there. That's
I
her
mean,
job.
essentially, we would be on site anytime the contractor has any question as far as they open up the roof and they see something that they weren't planning on and they want to propose to do X, Y, Z to it. We would essentially have the power to say, no, we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it this way, or we're not going to do that at all. We don't see the need to do that. If they propose a change order, we would be essentially advising the town on whether that change order, we feel that change order's reasonable or
Right.
warrantable or anything like that. I mean, essentially, it's our design, so then we would be seeing it through to the end to say, make sure it's done the way according to it is, and make sure that they're not trying to get away with doing something.
Hoffman works exclusively for the town of Fairfield. They have no connection with, in any way, shape, or form with the construction
That's
contractor?
correct.
No, yeah.
Mr. Brockfield, if I could just jump in.
Yeah.
So essentially, you're serving as an owner's rep in the
Correct.
common vernacular, okay. Now, in terms of the other concern you have, Mr. Brockfield, are we going for this type of project, do we typically go for a fixed cost contract?
For bidding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. That would be how not to exceed.
Right, because that would be kind of your incentive in terms of coming under, because with a fixed cost contract, you have a high end saying you're not going to come in over $11 million. If you come in under, basically the town and the contractor would split the difference, essentially, with
No,
certain
no,
types
no.
of fixed
Whatever's left is the town's. We won't
That's
spend
another type, so that's the type
We're
you
not
would
going to
go
spend
for.
that money.
All right,
Hopefully. Okay.
okay.
So, okay.
Whatever, we're asking you to give us the $11 million so that we can get the roof started, bed it, get it going this summer. But if the guy comes back and says we can do it for less, that's great for us.
Right, I figured that's, yeah, okay. And then the other question I have, and I'll get all my questions out, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues. These estimates we have here, so we have a Hoffman estimate, and we have a Dayhill company, which I guess is the contractor, right?
They were hired to give us a second estimate, a second look.
Right, that was that's where I'm going with this. And then we have Hoffman giving us a proposal to be the, I guess, the architect.
Basically the architect, our boots on the ground.
Right.
And,
So if we approve this, what will be the competitive bidding process for both the contractor and for the architect on the project, or the manager of the project going forward?
well, the bidding is up to the purchasing authority, so it'll be publicly bid, and assuming that's what we're talking about.
Okay. And is there any potential conflicts? I know you're sitting at the table, I apologize, but is there any potential conflicts in your view, having the architectural firm that did all this work then have the ability to bid on the project afterwards?
No, because I was under we were going to hire them to do the work, as far as this is concerned. When Twee gets back from her sabbatical, we'll go over that in more depth. But no, because they've executed the contracts up to this point, and they're going to oversee their contracts as part of their construction administration. It's really it's just an extension of their work.
Which I want to say that, I mean, that's something that we do all the time. I mean, we provide construction administration services for pretty much all of our projects that go into construction. We see it through from documents all the way through.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not impugning you guys at all.
No, I just wanted to explain
to
the way it usually works.
something, you know, if I was an architectural firm looking to bid on the project, I kind of feel like it's not a very fair playing field if one group has already been hired and paid to do all this work and have such an inside knowledge of the entire job and what goes into it.
Right.
And then,
Well, they were chosen to do the work, so I'm going to know whatever time
yeah,
period of
I actually would like to defer, I don't want to put him on the spot, but the guy on this board who I think has the most expertise here is Mr. Brown on this stuff. So I'd like to actually
Absolutely.
voluntarily turn it over to him and with any other questions you might have. But maybe if you could have any
Mr. Brown,
comments
if you
about-
could elucidate for us, thanks.
I'm not a roofing expert, just, well, first, your fee's a fixed fee, I see a proposal? Okay, so it's set at 444,000? Okay. And just then to follow up, Mr. Brockfield, on the Day Hill, so we have, they didn't really give a quote, what they did was they gave a budget per square foot.
Correct.
Okay.
And I've asked them for their backup as far as what numbers they used, similar to this that we
sorry?
provided. I've asked Dayhill to provide their backup for the budget number that they provided, similar to what we did here. I
Right,
haven't received that.
because, okay. Now, is the scope match?
Yes.
Does their scope and this
Yes.
scope match? Because their scope comes out at $25 a square foot.
Correct.
Okay, yours is a lot higher.
Well, they also did not escalate any of the costs over the 4-year project. They just gave a $25 per square foot flat cost for the entire project. We started at a $30 per square foot cost because we've seen, prices come in between $25 and $30. So we wanted to err on the safe side, starting at the higher number, a $30 per square foot cost for the amount of work that we're proposing is, in our opinion, pretty reasonable as far as what we've seen. for
As a
roofing
budget
project.
quote,
Yes.
right? But it's $35, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's $35 when you take the whole project over the 4 years and divide it by the number of square feet within the roof itself.
Okay. So when I look at these, at a construction estimate, I'm thinking labor and I'm thinking material. Am I missing anything? It's labor and material, right? So if you could just help me out, if we could just go to this construction cost estimate.
What page are you looking at?
On this one right here. And if we could just take phase one, and we'll take the very first thing we're going to do, which is remove, it's really remove existing single ply.
Correct,
Right,
yes.
we're not replacing.
Right.
So it's $195,000, and this phase happens to be 64,000 square feet, right? Okay. So when we come up with $195,000, that's a lot of man-hours. Is this prevailing wage, first of all?
Yes.
Okay. But even prevailing wage is about $50 an hour per guy, correct? So how long will it take, in your estimate, whoever does the project, to remove 100 or 64,000 square feet of single-ply roofing?
I can't say as far as, how long it would take. I mean, it's
A week?
longer than a week, probably like
2 weeks?
2 or 3 weeks. I mean,
So
there's a lot
even-
of, there's, I mean, included in this whole cost too is their mobilization cost for the contractors. They will have to do that for each phase of the project over again. So it's not like a typical
understand.
project
Each
where you
phase you have to
start,
do.
yeah, where you start, you mobilize for the entire project and you
Yeah, your startup costs, you're
Right.
saying. Okay. But still, even if it's 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks, and what do you want to go, $50, $60 an hour? I mean, how many guys are going to be on this roof? See, I understand the slight balloon here, right? Because you don't want to have to come back and say, guess what, I'm $1 million short. But I'm just wondering how far we went. I mean, $195,000, you can do an awful lot of work for $195,000. And all we're doing is removing single-ply roofing. It's not, I mean, from what I've seen, at least on our roofs, not that difficult. But, but I haven't been up on this roof. So maybe is there something
there's
I'm missing?
the removal of the single-ply roofing and also the removal of the existing insulation, which is mechanically fastened right now. And they have to make sure that when they remove the existing insulation, that they don't just pop the fasteners out because they'll damage the deck. They have to actually back them out individually. So, I mean, in a square of insulation, you can have 20 fasteners.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more labor-intensive than just ripping off an existing roof,
I understand.
if they take it
So,
the way they're supposed to.
I mean, I understand there's 100 and some odd leaks in this roof.
160-something.
Okay. So it's obvious the work needs to get done. So we need to move this along, because I believe at this point, we were supposed to be in Phase 3 of this, according to the Board of Ed. Regardless, I mean, we need to move this along, right?
Yeah, we need to
leaks
move it
keep
along.
coming,
Yes, sir.
and there's...
Yes, sir.
I don't know what happens when it rains, when you have 100 and something leaks, but however, but we just want to, at least, we want the estimate to be somewhat close to what it's going to come in. We want to bond, in my opinion, get a number that's going to be somewhat close to what we think the bids are going to come in. So,
Right.
we don't want to take it to 11 million. And as a matter of fact, I think at first we thought it was going to be 6.4 million.
That was Mr. Cullen's number.
So what was he looking at that's different?
Mr. Tetro, did you want to add something? Mr. Collins here, too. And Mr. Collins here as well.
Just by way of helping, one, we're basically asking for authorization to bond a number, kind of not to exceed. The project then goes out to bid. Hopefully, those bids come in less than this number.
Right.
But I think, Mr. Brown, to your point, since this is different than a typical project, because it's spread over 4 years,
Right.
perhaps the best way to get to your answer is say, look, come back after a year, tell us where you are versus where you thought you'd be after the first year of the project. I think that answers some of your questions in terms of what did you learn, how many fasteners, what did the labor costs go. That also gets back to Mr. Brockfeld's point. A year from now, it's looking, okay, kind of what's the next escalation cost, but the plan is to have somebody bid for the entire project.
Correct.
So the costs over that time, so we'll know the total cost, in essence, over 4 years for that, but we'll also be able to go back and see what happened in the first year to see how we're doing, if that would help. I mean,
No, that's, and we've talked about that before, and I think that's an excellent idea. Is there a way that we could do that at this point with a different project?
No.
No?
We don't have anything like this right now in the projects.
Okay. So I understand, we're going to 11 million. If it comes in at 7, 8, all the better. We're just trying to cover ourselves. I'm just curious, I still think we should be somewhat realistic. I mean, do you think this 11 million, or 9 million really, is realistic? Because I look at material and I look at labor, and I just don't see, like, this Phase 1 at $1.8 million. And I'd feel a little more comfortable if you could help me. Like, how many man-hours, I mean,
Well, no, it's
something,
done by-
how much
it-
material?
it's
Did
done-
you, did you look at it that way, or?
No. It was done on a square foot basis. All we have is historical data. Hoffman's the best source for that. They escalated it. We're rerunning most of the roofs that came forward last year were at $25 a square foot, and they were not this type of roof.
Like the senior center?
I would say, yeah, like the senior center, that came through at a different, that was one of the ones I recall, came through at that amount. I don't remember where they ended up bidding it, what they got it out at. But I don't think we've overinflated this. I mean, I really don't.
We don't know. Well, so I see
Well,
what
it's
you
an
just- you
it is
just
an
took-
estimate.
you
It
just
is our
took
best estimate that we can come to you with.
257,000 square feet and times it by 35.
Well, they worked into that number. Basically, they started with the $25 a square foot, right?
$30 we
$30 a
started.
square foot, and then they went from that to, figured out the escalation, and then it said, okay, then we divided backwards, and this is the number we
What
came.
was figured in the escalation?
We added an additional $5 per square foot,
Why?
just based on the cost of materials, the amount of labor involved.
But we don't, you don't know the amount of labor involved.
It's hard to, I mean, when you're starting off with an estimate like this, generally when we do provide construction cost estimates, or we call them opinion of probable construction costs, we don't necessarily factor in whatever the prevailing labor rates are. We base it on the amount of work that we see, the square footage of the roof, the average cost that we see as far as what per square foot of a particular scope item generally costs based on our past, history. So it's hard to right now. I mean, probably some of the, I'd like to say, probably some of the lower numbers that you might have seen associated with this project might be based on a different roof system. The modified bitumen roofing system is probably on the more expensive side of a roof system. It's not a single-ply EPDM system where, you can run, can get, $8, $12 a square foot. These can be, upwards of $18 a square foot because you basically have 2 layers of material with another layer embedded in between as reinforcement. Then you have to go back in, spread granules over the surface of it. So it's a lot more labor intensive than just a single ply roof where you'd hear it down and you can do, thousands
Mr.
of
Brown,
square
can I
feet
just
a
jump
day.
in for a quick sec on this point? Do you compare, when you're speccing out a job like this, do you compare it to other similarly situated buildings you've seen elsewhere? Do you take a look at, say, a high school that was done in another town that has similar type of footprint? Is that in your equation at all?
As far as providing an estimate?
Yes.
Our numbers are generally based on what our past experience is with projects. We do a lot of roofing projects. We do a lot of roofing projects with this particular system, so we have a good idea of how much these will generally cost. Because there's a little bit uncertainty as far as phasing it out over a period of
Right.
time, because the roof is so large, and there's probably, I think, 43 different roofs.
Right.
There's a lot of different detailing that has to go into it that, with a typical school roof, you might not have as much.
Have you seen a project similar to Ward in that you have so many different, essentially individual roofs comprising the entire system, or is this such a unique project that, even though you have past experience to base it on, you may not exactly have a great handle on what this is going to entail? Is there something similar out there?
I'm trying to think back in our past projects. I'm sure we've done many school roofs. I don't know whether we've done a high school roof where it's such a massive building. I would have to actually check on that.
Okay.
I mean, basically, we based our numbers on the system that we are recommending. As far as, the amount of work that can be done in a certain period of time. Again, there's a short period of time between the end of school and the beginning of school.
Right.
So they might have to actually, increase their manpower in order to get it done. I mean,
So it sounds like materials are more of a known cost and labor is kind of the X factor.
Right.
Would that be accurate?
I mean, and that would be based on, what the contractor feels they could do within a certain period of time, how long they feel it would take them to remove the roof and install the new roof.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, I jumped in. Go ahead and continue.
I mean, this is a whole new roof system, right? Whole new type of roof. And it was chosen because this last one lasted 20 years. This is more expensive type,
It's more expensive, it lasts longer.
more
It's
than 20 years?
More
Well,
than 20
maybe
years.
this one didn't
can
really
add,
last 20 years.
Can last with proper maintenance, of course, upwards of 30 to 40 years. I mean, essentially, it's an asphalt roof. I mean, it's like the old the old asphalt roofs. The only difference is they've added materials to the membranes to actually make them more flexible, more durable to temperature changes. One of the benefits of the modified bitumen roof is because of the double layers, you have more protection. As far as maintenance goes, if you have an issue where you have to go up and do a patch, it's a lot easier to patch. The PVC roof, you basically have to heat weld all the seams, and if you get somebody up there that really doesn't know how to do that, you can cause a lot of problems. It's not as easy as just throwing some mastic up on the roof or some tar up on the roof. Modified bitumen roofs are probably a little bit more forgiving as far as, somebody going up there and, repairing things.
Now, and I don't mean to just keep splitting hairs here, but if we, because I understand what Mr. Tetrell's saying, I'm looking at this number, and if I could just pick out another one, it's $970,000 for Phase 1 to install the modified bitumen roof and flashings. So in your experience, if you take the 970 and it's labor and material, how much would you say of that cost is labor, and how much would you say is material?
I think I'd have to look at my numbers for that, but I think I said it was about $15 a square foot installation, labor and materials. I'd say
20,
I'm sorry?
and 20 for material?
No, it was $15 inclusive,
Okay.
labor materials. It's for that actual item of work, $15 a square foot. So, you can have, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what the breakdown is, but that was the number that I used for that phase. And then, I bumped it up for the next phase and bumped it up for the next phase. There are some variances between, the makeup of the roof, the amount of flashing, the perimeter details, there's differences. And also based on the insulation layout requires some, things being raised, some things being, reworked. So,
That's $15,
I believe I would have to double check on what the number I actually used, but,
well, 64,000 square feet, right?
right.
So
But
it's-
I'd have to check on the number, yeah. I think it was $15 a square foot that I started with.
all right.
How many, I'm sorry, Joe, can I ask a question? How many, I know we're getting very detailed, and I apologize, I really do, because you didn't come prepared with all this stuff, but how many men would be, or women, would be up on the roof approximately working during this Phase 1 on this $970,000? 5 people, 10, 100, 1,000?
Could be as many as 30.
I'm sorry?
You got as many as 20 to 30 people up there.
Because I just did a very back-of-the-envelope calculation, and I used the assumption that it was, and I could be all wrong here, approximately two-thirds labor, one-third materials. I just made that up. I'm just listening to your body language. I don't know if that's correct. So if that was correct, that's $1,700, at $50 an hour, that's $1,750, at 8 hours a day working, that's 1,750 days of working. So if you had 20 guys on the roof?
20,
Sounds
30,
like a lot.
yeah.
I don't know.
There are. They're like ants.
20.
They're all over the place.
That's 90 days of work. Could it take 90 days to do that? I'm just doing the numbers. Unless I did it wrong, I should do it again. I see Mike's eyes, but just,
I think that maybe the labor versus materials breakdown you might have used might be,
But you see, that's the way I look.
One at a time, guys, one at a time.
I gotta say, it's hard, because that's kind of, in a way, it's a means and methods. It's how the contractor wants to tackle a particular phase of the project. If he wants to, double up on his man hours, the amount of people on the roof in order to get it done faster, in order to get the ripping of the roof done and everything like that done faster, then that's his way of tackling the project. Like I said, I'm only basing this on what our past history is as far as the per square foot cost of a particular scope item. And I can't tell you what the breakdown is as far as, because generally when we do bids, they don't provide us necessarily with their labor rates per scope item. It's not like they're saying, okay, we're going to devote this number of man hours for this item. It's whatever they need to do in order to get that scope
Right.
item done.
see, what my problem is that there's kind of like two decisions we're making here at the board tonight. And I think one decision's already pretty much made up. I shouldn't speak for my board members, but listening to the language and the body language, I don't think anybody here is arguing about the need for fixing this roof. And to all the parents and citizens who are here tonight, I don't think anybody is questioning that. But we have another responsibility here. Really, what our genuine responsibility is the financing of this. And I just have to tell you that and this has been a particular pet peeve of mine and maybe with my colleagues, is that I'm a strong believer that without getting, by approving projects with price tags, you are sending messages to contractors and bidders about the amount of money that's available to do work. And this has been and I know there are reasons why this is done in some cases, Mike, I know, and it's always been done this way, I've been told a million times. And I'm just seeing numbers here, and again, I know that for example, I just made those numbers up, 2/3, 1/3. But even if I'm off, these numbers don't make, in other words, there's really no way you could parse that number and have it make sense to me with 20 or 30 guys on the roof at $50 an hour. In other words, it just doesn't work. So even if you change my numbers and said I was completely wrong, so then I come up with 40 days. That still can't be possible.
Well, the multiplier would be higher, too. I mean,
Mr. Tetra, you had something you wanted to add? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there are two different issues here. One, the question for tonight, quite simply, is do we need a roof at Ward? Second, we need authorization to spend the money. If you don't like the 11 million, make it 9 million, make it 8 million, make it 5 million, whatever you want to do.
Well, I don't want to pick a
But
number
we
out
have,
of a hat.
hold it, if we could. We did what you asked. We brought in a professional architect to professionally price it, to use industry standards to come up with a price. They came up with 11 million. That's the question for tonight. But to your question, which is a broader base, and as you pointed out, you've asked it several times, then I'd encourage this board to step back away from the project, though, all right, and look at how we bid out projects, and look at whether this is the right step and right process, and look at maybe what some other towns do, and let's take a look at that and see if this is the only way. There may be in certain projects, forgive me, there may be certain school projects in which we need to have the authorization to do this in order to get through for the reimbursement and everything else. However, there may not be in all cases. And if I remember correctly, I think in Penfield, we went out with and got some bid prices before doing this.
Bid it before, yeah.
So that opens up the question, okay, when are we obligated to do it one way and when do we have the option of doing it another way? But I would suggest that because that is not Ward roof specific, that this board might want to consider, and I certainly would support it in whatever we need to do to do that. Do that away from tonight. Do that when we can get the information, do some of the research ahead of time, and have a full-blown discussion on that so that we can answer your question once and for all, rather than asking it every single time a bond resolution comes before the
I
board.
would point out, we do have a subcommittee that's charged, Mr. Brown is our representative on that subcommittee that's charged with kind of looking at these building projects and, coming up with a better way to do it. This is what we got in front of us tonight. I think your points are certainly valid, and it's a question that has come up not just from you, but from many members in terms of we're putting a number out there. Are we basically showing our hand, if you're looking at it as a poker game? But the reality is that we have a project that's before us, and we need to vote on it as it's before us.
Okay, let me ask you guys one other question then, in terms of process that, and you guys won't like this, but, because the other thing that you said, what was your name again? I'm sorry? Aaron. Was that you built in a $5 a square foot per year escalation. I think that's what you said, right? Mm-hmm. So that's 17% a year. Actually, it's a little less than that in the out years, right, by the math, but it starts out at 17%. In other words, that number can't be right. So I understand you have to come up with some number, but it just cannot be that it would be 17% a year every year for 4 years higher. Something would be terribly wrong if that was the case. So right there, by definition, we've got to have a number that's way too high. But why don't we consider, first of all, I would bid this job out 4 times, to tell you the truth. I would not approve this as all 4 ahead of time. I wouldn't even ask for a bid for all 4, because they're going to put in a big number to protect themselves, whoever the bidders are. And I'd much rather take the risk that the number will be much lower than inflation. It's not going to just emerge out of nowhere. But why can't we approve a bond resolution that covers the expected first-year costs with the express intention of doing the whole project, and then come back to us at the end of the first year with the results and so forth? And then
Mr. Brockfeld, that's a good point, and it's actually leading towards something I want to talk to bond counsel about, but can we put that in abeyance for now and just go around to the other members, because we got a few members who've been waiting patiently. So
no problem.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, any other members want to chime in? Mr. Kiley.
You needed one person.
I'm always glad to help out. Thank you. I wanted to go back to one of Aaron's earlier points about the warranty. Can you walk me through the warranty, what it is, what it means, who's responsible for what pieces, whether it's materials or whether it's something that malfunctions due to a contractor or a subcontractor putting it in? I'm not looking to have a full-blown warranty discussion here. We've had enough of those in recent times, but specific to this warranty, what does it mean? How are we protected? And why is it right for us? Or why is it right for this project?
Well, generally, the contractor, once the work is finished, will provide I believe, I want to say it's a 2-year warranty on their workmanship. The materials warranty from the roofing manufacturer will be based solely on their materials to ensure that the materials are installed per their accepted details. They would actually be on site to say that this roof is being installed per their recommended details and it doesn't affect their warranty. If something were to happen as far as a leak, you would have to have them come out and they would have to either tell you, yeah, it's based on the material itself or it's based on the workmanship of the contractor installing the material.
Right, and can I stop you right there? Because we've gotten tripped up on this one over the years. For instance, your point about the contractor or the manufacturer comes out and puts their stamp of approval on it. Project's done, these guys did it right, looks good, I don't see any defects that are apparently caused by bad construction or implementation of the product, so we're good. 5 years later, it leaks, there's a problem. We've had those conversations down the road, well, it's not all the product's fault, it's the manufacturer, it's the how it was implemented or how it was put together. So how do you get comfortable knowing that you're going to have that warranty down the road beyond those 2 years where the contractor would be liable himself?
There's always that issue as far as providing warranties. I think a lot of owners think that when they have a warranty on a particular system, they feel it's going to cover them forever for everything. Manufacturers will, provided that the install was done properly, will actually try to figure out whether it is the material itself that caused the issue. And then based on that, then they will say, you know, we'll repair this this issue based on the fact that this was a fault of the material and not of the workmanship. I mean, it's difficult a lot of times to actually have a warranty be honored based on the workmanship because they always say, well, it wasn't installed properly. But you always have that backup as far as your technical rep was out there when the roofing was being installed and said this is being installed per our recommendations, per our warranty requirements, to back you up to say that this was the workmanship that was done. You're always going to have somebody, you might have somebody come out there, you know, 20, 15 years down the road that looks at it differently, but you do have that backup as far as having the technical rep on site saying this has been installed properly.
So there is an official review and sign-off process by the manufacturer that should get us comfortable
Right.
at that point in time without knowing what might happen 5, 10 years down the road. Because, I mean, I've never, even for a small home building project, it's rare to have a contractor come in and look at what was done either 2 years ago or 30 years ago and not find some fault in it, right? It's just a natural thing. It happens all the time. I don't know why they did this that way, or I never would have done it this way. Therefore, we now need to go fix this.
Right.
So those conversations are commonplace, and I think they lead to conversations about, well, therefore, the warranty may not be valid to this degree because of these things. So I don't know what the answer is, but I've known we certainly have tripped over it a few times, and you mentioned it, so I wanted to get some more information.
Warranty a separate, you said it comes with a 20-year warranty.
I would have to,
No, it's not. Usually it's built into the,
Yeah.
it's part of the specifications.
yeah, I mean, that was included in our
No,
specifications.
it's not like broken out.
You good, Mr. Kiley?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Stone?
Thank you. What would be the harm if we just bonded for the first phase and not the other phases? Okay.
Did Did you finish your question, Mr. Stone?
Well, I see the first selectman hand go up, so I
Finish your question, Mr. Stone.
All right. In other words, if we could do it that way, then we would get a level of experience for the other phases, have some learning about it, we know what the roof is, and maybe, we'd want to do it differently or something. I mean, we're spreading this thing out over 4 years, which I'm not too happy about, to be honest with you, since the roof is leaking now. But, it's just a thought that maybe if it could be done that way, we might learn something.
Mr. Tetro, please.
Thank you. And just to reiterate for everybody, a point that Dr. Teitel made pretty clearly a while back, there have been a number of leaks, and new leaks are popping up every time. They do fix them when they find them. So they're not 150 active leaks necessarily at this point in time. But that is, I believe, a number, a rolling 12-month number, if I heard Dr. Teitel correctly. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that because of the age and permeability of this roof that we're buying more buckets for the roofs. We're in fact fixing the leaks as they go, but new leaks are popping up. Second, and again, looking at the function of this board and looking at where we are, the issue is, do we need a new roof? Mm-hmm. How much money should we allow for the construction of that? Do we have reasonable construction estimates to provide support for that number? I think your thought is well placed, and I would encourage you to recommend to both the building committee and the purchasing department that in fact perhaps they bid it both ways to see what the pricing is. If you provide money for 1 year, and what if we got a great 4-year? We're talking about no inflation. What if someone comes out and says, yeah, I'll do it with no inflation. I'll do the $30 a foot for the next 4 years. I'll guarantee it right now. You only allow enough money for the first year, we can't take advantage of that. Then we're playing it the reverse way. Mm-hmm. All right? So that I would, well, I think that thought's well taken, and I think that we should perhaps bid it that way, and I encourage you to recommend it to purchasing. I would also encourage you not to be the purchasing department and let the professionals do their job and evaluate both options in doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. I see Mr. Hiller's got his hand up.
I'll follow up on what the first selectman just said, and I think one of the intents of the purchasing authority, of which the first selectman is a member, is to bid this with bid alternates. The proposal that you have before you is over a 4-year period. One of the concerns on that is the sheer magnitude of the volume of roof that we have to do there, and also the statutory and regulation limits as to when we can go in there. So you have that. There may be contractors out there. We think that because of the size of this roof that you're going to get some of the big contractors who are going to submit bids on this proposal. But they're going to bid it, as the first selectman says, on the basis of pricing that they see and that they can realize on their work schedule that they can schedule this over the next 2, 3, or in the worst case, 4 years. 4 years is a max. And realize this, we're not going to borrow that much money. We're going to borrow a fair amount of money on this, but we're not going to borrow $11 million or $9 million in year one. We have tax regulations as far as that's concerned, the bond council can address, but we're only going to borrow a modest portion of that in the first year, or that's our plan.
Mr. Tetro, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to add back in, as Mr. Hiller was saying, I mean, that every board that approves this and the departments that are all involved, the billing committee, purchasing, including finance, all have different roles to do. When you look at finance, we're expecting Mr. Hiller to take this $11 million based on when we build it and when it comes in and break that down and either ban it for certain years, bond it over 20 years, and pick how that impacts our waterfall chart, but specifically our debt service, best over that time. And we give them a certain amount of flexibility to do that. When we approve this recommendation, we don't go back and say, and now we expect you to ban it here, we expect you to bond it here, we expect you to combine these numbers, because we don't know what the interest rates will be, what the other debt load will be, and when the most appropriate time is to do that. We allow him to do his job. And I think that's the same thing on looking at trying to break this out. That's why I'd encourage you to recommend strongly that we look at the 1 year or frankly 2 year, 3 year that purchasing do it, as Mr. Hiller said, with the add alternates that allow either add alternates or breaking up the bidding process to allow for that. So we maximize the advantage the town can get. But I strongly encourage you to pick a top number and let us have that flexibility, let purchasing do their job, and let the building committee do their job in looking at that.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
can I
Stone,
just
did you have
follow up
anything
on one
else?
thing on that? What I
Go ahead.
did just pass out to the board, and this board would be familiar with this because at the Capital Planning Summit back in September, we passed out this very document. In fact, the first column on this shows the 920 of 11 proposal as to what we envisioned the bond sale to be at that time. This was modified, again, as of the end of January, and this is an estimate as where we are. If you look at this roof project, back then, we were only estimating a little over $1 million.
Right.
We think because of the size of the proposal that's before you, and because of reductions in other projects at this time, the windows, which are not before you and likely will not be before you this summer, and a reduction in the bond costs on the train station, that we can take advantage of historically low interest rates and really raise the threshold level on this. But this, again, that this is a work in progress and won't be finalized for another 5 months.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stone, back to you. Did you have anything further?
Just a question for the first selectman. If I wanted to do that, do we change the wording of this, or is this just come as a recommendation?
Again, I would do it just as a recommendation. I think I think it's a great idea, by the way. Please don't misinterpret any of my comments. I think that's something that should definitely be explored. And I think that the building committee, over the course of their project, is making literally and perhaps in this project, not quite as many purchase decisions as a typical building committee. But building committees over time make literally hundreds of purchase decisions. And we count on them to make the best decision at every point in time throughout the renovation of a school or the building of Penfield, that type of thing. So I think you're pointing out something that might not have been obvious, but I think is a great suggestion and something we should definitely look to, as Mr. Brackfeld pointed out. In this economy with low interest rates, let's play it both ways. Let's see what we get in 1 year, and let's see what we get over 4, and see which one wins.
Yes, please.
Is it possible to do this in 1 year with multiple contractors, or is that a no-no?
No, it is not something we would at all, you couldn't,
Okay.
you'd have competing areas, then you'd have problems with, well, they come
Logistics.
together, and then, well, that's not my area, that's your area, and who did the seam and who didn't do the seam. It would cause a lot of
Okay.
issues.
You
And
good,
that's
Mr.
not-
Stone?
Okay.
All right, thanks. Any members who have not spoken yet want to chip in at this point?
Mr. Polito, I would just like to add one thing.
Sure, Mr. Kelly, please.
To just, I listened to the question, if you asked us to come back 4 times, basically, we'll say 4 years, every year you want me to come back and go through the funding process to get the money, we're still going to spend almost all that 11 million. So the question is, do you want me to come back 4 times to go through this for the same roof, or do we want to allow us to do our job and allow the purchasing authority to construct the bid in such a manner that your recommendations are great? I mean, those are fine. I'm just saying, to me, we're going to spend the money, and it's got to get done in the next 4 years. We can't wait anymore. It's not something we can put off. That's all.
Okay, point taken. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. DeWitt, do you want to chime in at this point?
Oh, yes, please.
Go right ahead, sir. You have the floor.
So I've been trying to follow as best as possible, so if I ask a question that's already been answered and belabored, please just turn me off.
I'll cut you off at the knees. You got it.
Okay. So I'm looking at all the documentation and addressing the speaker. So this is a 4-phase, 4-year plan, correct?
Yes.
He said yes.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I think this has already been answered, but I'm curious what's going to be done for the, I heard Mr. Tetro say there's not 100 leaks, but all the emails we've been getting today, what is the contractor going to be responsible for minimizing leaks initially over the entire roof?
No.
The answer is no.
No.
No,
Okay.
he's going in, they
Okay.
have a program.
Hold
So
on,
I
Chris.
want to go on to my next topic, which is warranty.
Right.
How much is, though, I don't see any breakout of the cost of the warranty. What exactly is the warranty going to cost us?
It's built into the contract documents, and it is part of the cost of the project. There is no breakout number for it. It doesn't work that way with the new roof.
Did you get that, Mr. DeWitt?
I think I understood that to say that if we can execute Scope A, we just get it for the $9.73 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's included in the cost. Correct, Mr. Kelly?
Correct. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Can you
It is
repeat?
included.
He wants to know if the warranty is broken out at all, or is it included in that $9.7 million for Scope A?
It's included.
Okay.
And again, this is an estimate.
Correct.
So we're asking for the warranty to be included in the estimate when it comes back, but the contractor has not bid yet, so they did not break out the cost of the warranty versus the other. So if the question is, the warranty should be an ad alternate so we can see the cost or something, perhaps that might be the way to approach that. But I don't, on the estimate side, they're not going to break out the warranty at this point, I don't believe.
Okay, did you get that, Mr. DeWitt?
I think so. I don't quite understand why it would be that way. I think if you were putting out an estimate, you'd have a line item, a discriminant line item in there for warranty, because I'll tell you right now, I'm looking at the paperwork on the warranty. In the document, this is 14 points, and it says it's a 20-year warranty with the first year for labor and materials, and then there's it's prorated after that. So I'd really like to see it broken out because, frankly, I wouldn't be a real big fan of actually including that if it were a substantial number. But again, back to this point about the roof is 1 year labor. What year is it starting from? Since it's a 4-year program, are we going to get 4 1-year labor warranties on each phase?
Yes, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. Once I'm sorry.
We could construct the document to go.
Yes, I mean, that would be perfect.
At present, Mr. DeWitt, the warranty is set to go from each phase for 2 years. However, I just concurred with Aaron, and we could construct the bid any way we want and have the warranty spread out at least to the end. I've done that on another project where you can actually get a little bit longer on the first phase 1 and phase 2 warranties. It's a matter of the construction of the bid, and it's just modifying a paragraph in the spec. It's a good point.
Did you get that?
I think so. I think the answer was that it will be broken out separately when we get the real estimates.
That's correct, and also they can bid it out different ways from what Mr. Kelly is telling us.
No.
Okay, and it'll be prorated for that 20 years. And I was having a little trouble at the beginning. I read all the pitch waiver documentation. Am I to understand we do not have a pitch waiver at this point?
That is correct.
Okay. And the state seems to be the one who's not giving us a state. What's the likelihood of us getting a pitch waiver and us being able to execute your calling phase Section A or Phase A?
The likelihood of getting a pitch waiver is slim to none, and the first selectman is pursuing special legislation with the senator and the state rep to get.
So I guess back to the vice chair and the rest of my board members. Would we make this bond resolution contingent upon that waiver?
That won't come until May, and we have to bid the project. Mr. Tetreault?
I think at this point, because of the low probability of getting any of those waivers, we have to evaluate this project as if we don't get them. If we get them, then that becomes something that's a positive, and we, in essence, don't have to spend as much money and don't have to bond as much.
So what you're saying is that the $11 million contemplates not getting a pitch waiver from the state?
Correct.
Thank you.
And contemplates no state reimbursement.
Okay.
Correct.
Understood.
Which I guess I don't understand because Hoffman Architects Scope B without the pitch waiver is $14.8 million. So is Hoffman saying that they're willing to do scope B
No,
at the $11 million, if you will?
No, the committee decided with the first selectman and with the Board of Education, Dr. Title, that it would cost the town more money to put in the half-inch pitch and try to go for the pitch waiver, because even if we don't use the pitch waiver and we forgo that, we're going to spend closer to $15 million with soft costs and only get back a portion of that, and it'll cost the town more money than to actually get the reimbursement from the state.
So, Chris, if I could just step in for a moment. So, Scope A, we're not going for reimbursement.
Right.
You're not doing the pitch waiver, which means you can do it at the quarter inch as opposed to the half inch, correct? Right. Thank you.
And, I mean, I want to explain the difference between the Scope B alternate 1 and alternate 2. In order to get state reimbursement, regardless of receiving the pitch waiver or not, you still have to remove all of the existing roofing down to the bare deck. And the major cost is not necessarily the cost associated with accommodating the half-inch per foot pitch. It has to do with the removal of the existing coal tar roofing and the replacement of the gypsum roof deck. So that item is the same between alternate 1 and alternate 2.
Okay, understood.
And you have to do that in order to qualify for state reimbursement regardless.
So you're talking about additional labor involved with meeting the requirements for state reimbursement, because you can't just leave it at the coal tar. You got to take that up and whatever decking comes with it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's why Scope B has removed existing port gypsum at one point, roughly $2 million, right?
Yes.
So did I understand, Mr. Kelly, correctly? So if we pass a bond resolution this evening for $11 million and the pitch waiver doesn't go through, the Board of Ed's going to come back looking for another $4 million approximately?
No. The pitch waiver has already failed. We're not going to get a pitch waiver.
So basically, Chris, what they're going for is Scope A, which is page 1, which is no pitch waiver, no state reimbursement, $9.8 million approximately.
I got you. Okay.
And then, Mr. Bolito, if you could,
Yes,
if you
Mr.
could take
Tetra.
them up, take them from the 9 million to the 11 million, since the other mics don't. The 9 million is the construction cost, and then the additional 2 million is in the soft costs and contingency that get the total project cost up to an estimated $11 million.
Right. Chris, the sheet that has roof replacement project, Fairfield Ward High School project cost summary sheet, do you have that? It's got 1 through 5, construction cost, architect fees, insurance costs, et cetera. You have that sheet?
I think I do, yes.
Okay, well, so basically you go from the 9.1 million construction, you add the soft costs such as architect's fees, insurance, bonding, and contingency. That's what gets you to the $11 million. Okay?
Yep, understand.
Okay.
I think I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, at this point, I want to, I'm sorry, Mr. Stone, you got something quick?
On all this, maybe it's a typo, but does it include the disposal of the old roof?
Yes.
And what about if there's asbestos in it, or has it been tested?
It would have to be tested with the, tested with the removal of, once the existing roofing is removed. One of the benefits of actually pursuing Scope A as opposed to the other scopes is if you're not removing the existing roofing and you're basically covering it over with another material, you're encapsulating the,
Right.
whatever might be containing asbestos. If you start removing that material in order to, qualify for the reimbursement, then, and it is tested to be hot, then you have to factor in additional cost for the abatement and disposal of that material.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Did you have something, Ms. Gaffney?
No.
All right, at this point, to move it along, I want to bring up bond counsel and to just discuss the phasing of this and any issues that we might have in terms of the bonding resolution. So if you could come up, please.
Are we dismissed? Or
No. Sit.
Sir, yes, sir.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, how are you all doing?
Good, thanks. Just identify yourself for the record for those of you.
Sure, I'm John Stapstrom from the law firm of Pullman Cumley. We're bond counsel to the town.
Okay. Now, one of the questions that's come up is this is a unique project in that it's phased in 4 phases over a period of years, which is not the typical project. Usually, there's some, time frame involved, but it's not over 4 years.
Stratfield is 5 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But with the school projects and something like this, is there any concern in terms of the way we're bonding it, the fact that it is phased over 4 years?
In discussing this with Mr. Hiller, the real concern that we had is that was our opinion that if you were going to proceed with the project, and you had an expected cost for the project, that the town should seek an authorization for the entire project.
Okay.
Understanding, of course, that you're going to rely on your finance director not to spend money that he doesn't have to spend. So within that maximum authorization of the $11 million, once the bids are received and the costs are actually vetted, obviously you're going to only go out and bond for the amount that you need, and you're going to either issue bonds or notes for that amount as the amounts are needed. I think one of the concerns is that if you do not have approval, if you do need to enter into a single construction contract, which is what we have been told and I seem to be hearing tonight, I don't know how the town enters into a contract for $9 million if you only have authorization for $4 million.
Understood. Any questions of bond counsel from any board members? No. Mr. DeWitt, did you have anything for bond counsel?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any last comments or questions or concerns before I throw it to the public? Seeing none. All right. At this time, show of hands, any members of the public wish to comment this evening? Just one. Okay. You're on the spot. All right. Please come up. Good evening, Mrs. Leslie. How are you this fine evening?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fine, Mr. Bolito, and you. Charlotte Leslie, 160 Hunter Road. For those of you who don't know me, I was the president of McKinley Elementary School in 2000 when they closed the building because it had been raining in that building for years. I'm here to ask for your support for this project. I do not have a child anymore in the school system, but because of my involvement, going back 12 years now, I'm very concerned about Ward. Approximately 10 years ago, the president-elect, and at that point I was the president of McKinley, we were at a special Board of Selectmen meeting at Ward, and we were begging them to fix the roof at Ward, because at that point in time, it had been raining in that building for years. So as much as, we are fixing the leaks as we see them, this building is wet. It has been wet for years. And wet building equates into the health of the occupants. So this is a project that absolutely has to go forward. It's already a decade too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Leslie. Any other members of the public wish to comment at this time? Come on up. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Gaylord Meyer, District 1. You had mentioned that there would be a technical advisor overseeing the work that's done by whoever you hire. Is that through your company? It is?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. It's only comment,
Oh,
but
sorry.
you
Only
can.
comment. I
Yep.
apologize.
That's all right.
Okay. Then my comment would be that I hope that it doesn't make sense to me to, based on your research and development here, in your background of building roofs, and I am assuming that you're good, but you've mentioned a couple of times tonight that you assumed numbers that you weren't quite sure about, and you were talking about the square footage. First you mentioned 25 feet, $25 a square foot, and then it went to 30. And then you mentioned something about the warranties, and I would love to see a little bit more clarity in this before this board goes ahead and votes on $11 million. I think that we need to fine-tune this number a little bit more clearly. Not to say that the roof doesn't need to be done. I don't discount that, but I just think that more detail needs to be done to the numbers and the breakout, especially with the warranties also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Mr. Carey coming up. Good evening, Mr. Carey.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the Board of Finance, for considering this evening. Just to provide a little bit of background and history in this situation, the town's expert has indicated that the roof that we have has a useful life of roughly 10 to 15 years. Earlier in her comments, we are in year 21 on this roof. So the history, as I understand this, which actually predates me, which means that it's old history, was that roughly 6 years ago there was a request to replace the roof. It was decided at that time to do some short work and extend it without a warranty, which is, to answer your question, the last set of roots, what was the benefit of the warranty? Well, there we are. About 2 years ago, the Board of Ed, I know when I first started, requested, 2 years ago, January actually, this project to be done. And it has escalated in terms of the amount of leaks that we're finding each year, growing year over year. So at this point, the concern, as I understand it, is that for us to be able to work this summer on this roof, the process, we might be at the line or just over that line. I see this board's brought up a lot of good and questions this evening that I'd share some of your concerns. The end, though, is that there's still a need for a roof at Ward, and we're 4 years out in getting that completed. So I hope that you'll balance the actual need as well there in your consideration this evening, and would ask you to support this bond resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. Any other members of the public? All right, then we will throw it back to the board for final commentary. Anyone else on the board have a comment? Mr. Brown?
Comment, no question.
Or questions, that's fine.
All right. You know, Mr. Tetro mentioned, the charge tonight is, the question is, do we support a roof for Ward or not? And I think the answer is yes. The question, though, the concern I have is the cost estimate and the way we go about it. Okay, but maybe that's a different venue. That's something we could take up in our committee, and we could work through that. But as the cost estimate goes, assuming this is approved and there's $11 million out there, it's still the lowest cost qualified bidder that wins, correct?
Yes.
Okay. They know they have $11 million, but they don't know what the lowest bid's going to be.
Correct.
So they're going to bid it accordingly, which makes me feel a little bit more comfortable.
Right.
They have to still win it. And it's public bid, it's on the web, as many bidders can show up as, it could be 10, who knows? How many do you anticipate to show?
I believe that that question was asked at the Board of Selectmen. There's 3 to 4, Aaron,
Yeah, I think so.
really qualified to take this project on.
Multi-phase project.
You know the names of them?
I do not. Aaron?
Oh, gosh, I can't.
Tech to America is one.
Okay.
Dayhill is the other? Are they one?
No,
No,
Dayhill,
Dayhill does not
Silktown,
Silktown.
Barrett. I think Tech to Tom or Sal may know.
You got them.
They all done work with us before, one way?
One way or the
Yeah,
other.
we don't think that Dayhill will bid on this project.
They don't bid on public
won't bid on
projects.
this project.
That's why we specifically went to them
Okay.
with the, for the cost estimate, so that we didn't give them any kind of,
We think there may be some out-of-state firms due to the size of the project, too.
Okay.
So then, just again, in something we addressed earlier, if you can somehow put it in the minutes or you put it in your notes, we'd love to see what these numbers come back at.
As the Town Facilities Commissioner, we're overseeing it. We're going to shepherd this through, so.
Because I don't know if we always see what the final result is, what the
No,
final
you know,
bid is. And I'm just saying, in this case,
I've done pretty good at getting I will use the example of Stratfield monthly reports to this body. I mean, I really did go out of my way to make sure you got updated on where we were and what we had. And we're trying to close that project out, and we are a smidgen under our budget, which is all good news for everybody. We still have to close it out, but that's all good. But I'll continue to do that. I will, as we go forward and we get the estimates in, and as many breakout numbers as are feasible and practical.
you
and-
show us.
Well,
We'd love to see the
absolutely.
effort.
Could we make a
Absolutely.
specific request for the minutes, please, that I would think at least at our quarterly meetings to get an update on this project? Would that be reasonable to board members?
Sure.
Quarterly? Okay.
Yeah, that's-
So have a update on this project for our next quarterly
I
meeting.
also want to, no, but I want to say something.
But also, I'd like to see what the bids come in at.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm just out of curiosity. Let's see what the bid comes in at.
Okay.
The low
I-
bid.
I'll take,
All right,
yeah,
thank you.
absolutely, you can count on me.
Thank you. You good, Mr. Brown? Anyone else? Mr. Stone?
Can it be bid both ways, like I said? In other words, someone put it out for Phase 1 and then also have it bid out for the whole project?
I'll talk to the purchasing authority, you know? That's really not my forte, but
Could we recommend it through the board? If
I think, if I can answer that, the purchasing director is currently out on medical leave, but hopefully back next week. Obviously, this is in the domain of the purchasing authority, but I think we intend to bid this with as many possible options as possible. I think the intent is, right now, and with the assistance of Hoffman, to ideally get back one qualified bidder, the most qualified bidder, but to leave as many options on the table as possible, and then to evaluate those options, again, with the assistance of our professional people.
Mr. Tetra?
Yeah, I think Mr. Stone raised a good point. I think that the simple way to answer that, because Ms. Holland just isn't here tonight, and the hesitancy is you just kind of what's qualified wasn't. I think that my thought would be this. We'll commit to do that, or come back to this board with an explanation on why we couldn't. That way you get your answer either way. I can't imagine why we wouldn't be able to do it that way unless there's some technicality. I think it makes good sense, and just the only way to get us off the
Right.
dime tonight, I think,
That's
is
fair
to
enough.
commit to do that.
We want to get off the dime.
Yeah.
Just put that in a minute.
And, yeah. And technically speaking, we don't really have authority over how a project is bid anyway, do we? Or do we?
That rests with the purchasing authority.
That's what I
really.
thought. Okay, so it will just be in the form of a recommendation.
But since 50% of the purchasing authority is here, I think we can agree that it will get strong consideration.
Okay. We know where you live too, that's all right.
That's right.
Anyone else? Mr. Kiley?
Was I? Okay.
What a guy.
Thank you, Mr. Polito. I'll be brief. This is a project that should have been done at least 5 years ago. I mean, it's clearly well overdue, and it's clearly something that needs to be done. It's important for all the reasons that we've already spoken about. It has to be done. It has to be supported, at least in my opinion, in its entirety to get the work done and fix the building. I'm good with all of that. What I'm not good with is some of the documents I have received here in relation to this this project. I'm really underwhelmed with this estimate, both in its content and its accuracy and the lack of detail behind it. And I'm not a construction person, but from what I've learned by listening to Mr. Brown over the years and some of the questions that Mr. Brockfield and other members have asked, I mean, at the top level, the numbers appear to be really over-egged. It's a big, there seems to be a lot of cushion in this. Now, I could be wrong, we could be wrong, but when we look at things that are just being escalated for the sake of being escalated, and when we look at large numbers that can't be identified and broken down by labor and materials and man-hours and even calculated, I lose a lot of confidence in what I'm looking at. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong or high or low. It just means I have no confidence in this budget. I mean, the one thing we know about any budget is it's going to be wrong. It's just a matter to what degree is it wrong, or is it high, or is it low. My gut tells me this is high, but I have no evidence to validate that. The other thing that troubles me is the predisposition to spending the $11 million. It kind of goes back to one of Mr. Kelly's comments. You know, whether we do it once, which I think we should do. I think we should support the project, bond the project, commit to it, and not have to come back and sing for your supper every year. You know, that we're 1/4 of the way through, and we have to go do this and go do that, and run the risk of something going off the tracks during that time. I'm good with that. But what I'm not good with is telling the world that we think it's going to be $11 million, whether it's 11 or 9 or 8, again, I don't know, and having that potentially impact the RFP process or the bids that we get back, and kind of committing to spending all the money. I mean, and I'm not saying Mr. Hiller is going to spend all the money, because I know he won't, But, you know, the message that we're going to spend all the money anyway, I don't think is the message that this board wants to hear or to send to anyone that might be hearing it. So I certainly was troubled by that. The work has to be done. So I plan to support the project, even though I certainly have some issues with the background and the information. And if we could get some more detail and answer some of Mr. Brown's questions about the labor and the hours, that would help me get comfortable, because there might be some big nuggets in there that we don't know about that make the math that looks high on paper sitting here not be so high, right?
Is that possible? Yes. We'll get you a better breakdown. I would just like to know what other information I can get for you, and
You know what, we'll
can you get?
We'll
send
figure
me-
that out as we go around the table, because I suspect that other people have comments to make and questions to ask. So you got one. Mr. Brockfeld, please.
Thanks. Well,
I'm done.
Mr. Kiley, I shouldn't have ceded my time because you said almost everything that I wanted to say.
Okay, so moving on now.
It's usually the other way around.
But, yeah, but all I like to say is that, you know, I wish this actually wasn't as important and as obviously necessary a project as it is, because I would love to lodge a protest vote here and vote no, you know what I'm saying, even though I
understand.
Yeah, because everything Mr. Kiley said, and again, I really think that for an something like an $11 million job, the level of specificity here just wasn't acceptable. To not have broken down hourly, you know, wages and materials. I'm not trying to beat up on you, but and the escalation, you know, what seems very random to me and so forth. And again, it all feeds into the end pie, which to me is the concern over approving a big number in public. And I don't want to have to repeat what Mr. Kiley said, but I think that look, it's pretty obvious we're going to approve this here tonight, and we're all doing that because we're really concerned about the situation at the roof at the school. I have a son at the school. I have a daughter who recently graduated. I know this is important.
If I might just ask, is there a document or a process or what we would be, you're asking us to so we could better come to you with that information?
Could I speak to that?
Sure.
I think it would start with a breakdown of labor and materials, because of the fact that the material seems to be a cost that is easily ascertained and quantifiable, whereas labor is something that is a complete X factor. It's something that, depending upon what conditions you find on the roof as you go through the project, could be any number of numbers. So that would really be helpful, you know, for us and certainly for future projects. It would seem to me to be a very basic breakdown to make. So I think that's a good start. Okay. Yeah?
I would agree with that.
All right. Any further comments, Mr. Brockfeld?
Thank you.
Any further comments from those physically present? Mr. DeWitt, any final comments or questions?
Just one quick one for the Board of Ed. Well, I'm staring at my my proposed capital improvements projects for 2012 and 2013, and I'm wondering why we're not considering this during budget process in a week.
Mr. Tetra, do you want to speak to that? And I can bring Mr. Perry up as well.
Well, simply, that's not how we do it. This is a capital project. This is $11 million.
Yeah.
It wouldn't come during our discussion of non-recurring. Non-recurring target is items between $100,000 and $1 million.
Yep.
At $11 million, this is far in excess of that.
Yeah, this is a standalone project, so I wouldn't have expected it to come through the budget process either. Maybe you're looking at it differently, Mr. DeWitt.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Anything else? Okay. All right. One final comment of my own, and then we'll throw it to a vote. This project needs to get done. It should have been done years ago. I agree with that statement. Why it wasn't done when this school was under reconstruction is beyond me, probably to save some money, any number of reasons. It should have been done. We need to get it done now. I will say that going forward, and I'm hoping that the subcommittee that we have established for building projects will address this, we need to seriously look at how we bid these things out, how we go about these major building projects. I think in the short term, a way to look at it, and it's certainly a little bit out of our purview, but more in terms of a recommendation, there are types of fixed cost contracts where if you come under that high number, the contractor and the owner, that being the town, would split the difference. So basically, it would give contractors an incentive to come in under budget. Just a thought, not something we're going to pin to it. Mr. Tetra, yes.
Just to clarify, when I talked about letting purchasing do their work, the suggestion that Mr. Bolito makes is right on the money, and in fact, that was done at Stratfield.
Right.
That type of incentive has been in place because purchasing's doing their job over time.
That's
So
good to know. I
They're
appreciate that.
actually taking that into account.
Good.
That's all.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so do I have a motion? Mr. Stone, do I have a second? Mr. Kiley. All those in favor? Got Mr.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Leclerc, Mr. DeWitt, Mr. Bolito, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Brockfeld, Ms. Gaffney, and Mr. Stone. It passes unanimously 8-0-0. All right, we're done with that one. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, thank you for your time. Aaron, thank you for your time. All right, let's get back to the agenda. Item number 4, yeah. This better be nothing, Paul. To hear and consider and act upon any other communications.
I have two documents I'd like to distribute to the board tonight. Number one, I think at the quarterly review meeting, we had a brief discussion on the delinquent tax list. Mr. Gorzolani, the tax collector, has produced as of yesterday through February 6th the top 25 delinquent tax list, and I'd be happy to share this with the press also.
None of us are on this list, right?
No present company listed, unless you're going under some LLC that we're not familiar with. Secondly, at that time, at the quarterly review meeting, I also mentioned that the Joint Investment Committee of the pension boards had commissioned some time ago the experience study from our actuaries, and I'm happy to distribute a draft of that study. The pension boards are meeting tomorrow evening at 7:30 at Independence Hall, and we'll be reviewing this. There are a number of recommendations from our actuary, Hooker and Holcomb, that are included within this report. And if you have the opportunity, you may want to attend the meeting. The actuary will be in attendance at that meeting. And there are some reasonably significant changes that they are recommending on what I have to say, virtually all of the components of the actuarial piece of our pension funds.
And what's the time and place of that meeting? for those who wish to
7:30 at Independence Hall. I think it's on the first floor.
Okay. Thank you,
Conference
Mr. Hiller. Item number 5, to hear, consider, and act upon any other business which shall properly come before this meeting. Do we have any? Yes, please.
This is Paul mostly, and the rest of the board. I know that we're interested and concerned, and we've discussed about paper reduction on the board, and we've been getting PDF, or not only PDF, but various
Correct.
electronic
emails,
right? And I have to tell you that I actually think at this point this is counterproductive from an environmental point of view. What's happening on two levels. One is that I can see that Paul, not knowing who may or may not have brought and printed out the stuff, has printed out copies of everything in multiple copies, so he's printed it. And this is small potatoes, but we're a volunteer board, unpaid, and we're being asked to print out, in other words, somebody has to print these things out, and I don't necessarily think it's the right message to ask and encourage volunteers to want to be on boards, to be asking them to be printing out and at the expense and also the inconvenience and responsibility of printing out these things and bringing them. Now, I guess the point I'm making is that we've talked, I think, correctly that at some point in the near future we'd love to have a more electronic board where we all have like an iPad or a laptop or something, and the paperwork's in front of us, and I think that is the ideal.
Yes.
But what I think we're doing right now is counterproductive. I know that I got, and no problem on your part, Paul, I know that the paperwork comes to you at different times of day. I got 4 different emails regarding tonight's meeting with attachments on each time. I'd happened to see all 4 of those emails, and I printed most of them
Right.
out, and I still missed one of them, ironically, tonight. But it's very possible that people could have missed one of those 4 or multiples. And I would just recommend that I think, until we've figured out a way to really be electronic and to really save paper, that we're better off going back to the way we were doing it before, where it was the responsibility of the town to get us the paperwork for
Right.
the meetings, unless there's something at the last minute, obviously, that can't be.
It's a fair point.
Yeah, I just don't think
Yeah.
I think we're duplicating the printing,
Right.
to tell you the truth. which-
First of all, well, okay, let me address, as chairman of the Budget Subcommittee, who, and we recommended those things, it's a fair point, and obviously it's a work in progress. Now, we never actually passed the policy that was proposed, so basically you've been kind of working as if it were passed. I will point out, there was a item in that policy which said that any board member for the first year can request that the items be sent the old way, for lack of a better word. So you have that option. If you don't like the way it's going with the electronic delivery, you can tell Mr. Hiller, from this point forward, I would like my documents delivered the traditional way via paper. So I think that's the out we put in the policy, understanding that this is kind of a tricky transition. Not everybody has a laptop with them, or an iPad or a Kindle or whatever. So we gave that out. So I think that addresses your concerns. I think unless you start somewhere, you're never going to get to where you want to be going. So that's why we had the policy that was proposed, and Mr. Hiller, we appreciate it, has been following the policy. And again, the answer is just that if you want it in paper, ask for it in paper, you'll get it in paper. Okay. Mr. Tetra?
Just as possibly a hybrid or a compromise on that. And because if you don't know they're going to come, you print them out and bring them here. If one of the costs, both in hard dollars and in operation, is the distribution and delivery.
Right.
So potentially, for your consideration, would be the idea that let them continue to be sent electronically. Count on Mr. Hiller to have a set here to print out, so you don't have to print them out at home. They will be here when you get here. But that, at the very least, saves the postage and the handling and some miles on Mr. Hiller's car.
Right.
In terms of actually distributing them out to the members of the board.
I think that's an excellent compromise. That would be perfect. We'd have a chance to review them at home,
Yeah.
but not have to worry about printing and carrying and forgetting, and also, by definition, us printing and you printing, which can't be
Right.
in the
No, I
interest
think
of what
that's a
we're trying to do.
perfectly fair compromise,
I
absolutely.
think that'd be a great idea. Can we do that, Paul? Can
I
we-
I think we can do that, and I think at least for the next 6 weeks, because...
You got bigger fish to fry.
7 weeks, I don't know. You lose count in February and March.
Right.
There's 2 things. First off, we're scheduled to meet next Thursday, the 16th, for the non-recurring capital items.
Yes.
I believe you probably have already received the Board of Education document in hard copy. Well done by Mr. Cullen and his staff. You will also be receiving a very similar document from Mr. White, who's putting together that, and I suspect we'll have that, if not by the end of this week, the first of the coming week, along with the bond resolution, which Bond Council is working on now, relating to all of those projects.
Okay. So forthcoming. All right. Thank you. I appreciate the commentary, definitely. All right, anyone else? Any other business? Motion? Mr. Brockfeld, second. Ms. Gaffney, all in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Excellent work.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Temporary Chairman.